One of the enduring and unshakable pillars of the Western popular music canon is a collection of songs and their interpretation by many different artists, written generally between 1920 and 1960, which has become known as the Great American Songbook. It's a closed book. Henry Mancini was probably the last new admission, but it represents a collection of works which were primarily written for shows or movies and not meant to be associated with a single artist or with the mass production of music that allows multiple artists to cover a song. It's music written for when adults were the primary market for music. Contemporary artists occasionally dabble in the songbook to mixed results. Linda Ronstadt made 3 wonderful albums, largely with Nelson Riddle in the early to mid-80s. Rod Stewart made a series of albums where, in typical Rod Stewart form, when he was good, he was very, very good, but when he was bad, he was horrid. Bob Dylan did it with it for 3 years to mixed results, but then we did get his wonderful version of That Lucky Old Sun. And of course, as long as Tony Bennett breathes, we have a living connection to the class and grandeur of the songbook. We're focused today on one of the most prolific, best loved, and at least via the tunes he wrote, best known contributors to that Great American Songbook, Harold Arlen. I would hazard a guess that anyone who's been raised on Western pop music over the last years knows a Harold Arlen song, and that includes all of my viewers. You want me to prove it? Just perhaps a snippet of melody will do. But there are dozens of instantly recognisable Arlen songs. Blues in the Night. A woman's a two-faced, a worrisome thing who'll lead you to sing the blues in the night. One of Arlen's personal favourites, it was written for a movie which became known as Blues in the Night. It was sung there by William Gillespie in a somewhat different form from the song we've come to know. It's one of the few times that Arlen had longtime lyricist Johnny Mercer change a lyric, moving the 4th verse up to open the song. When they'd finished, they gate-crashed a dinner party at singer Margaret Whiting's house, where Mickey Rooney, Judy Garland and Mel Torme et al. Were gathered. When they played the song, Rooney declared it to be the greatest thing he'd ever heard, and Garland made him play it 7 times over. The only complaint about the song is that Billie Holiday, for whom it seems tailor-made, never recorded it. We'll have to do with Dinah Shore's almost accusative version, or Sinatra's masterclass on his For Only the Lonely album. Accentuate the Positive. Written in 1944, this song shows perfectly the uncanny synergy between Arlen and his great friend and 15-year songwriting partner Johnny Mercer. Arlen always composed his music first and then asked for lyrics, which Mercer would tailor to both the feel and melodic intricacy of the song. And he nails it impeccably here. Mercer was a rarity amongst authors in the songbook, inasmuch as he was raised amongst black folks and understood their music and their language. A native of Savannah, Georgia, he worked amongst African American field hands on the farms and in factories as part of the family business, attended a black church and went so far as to study and learn the Geechee language of the Gullah people. Mercer himself had the original hit with it, and Bing Crosby and the Andrews Sisters had a bigger hit with it, but Bing's gentle croon doesn't come a patch on Mercer's aesthetically bluesy delivery, and the Andrews Sisters are just annoying. Dinah Washington, Sam Cooke, Al Jarreau and even Paul McCartney recorded it, and Dr. John made an especially ballsy and brassy version of it on his In a Sentimental Mood album. Stormy Weather. Written with Ted Koehler, this song alone would be enough to make any songwriter's reputation. Lena Horne's theme song, it was originally part of a review written for Ethel Waters at Cotton Club in 1933, who performed it in a blue light. Koehler's lyrics pick brilliantly at the condition of the blues, and the music shows how much better than most of his contemporaries, Arlen understood jazz. The song has remained popular through the years with versions by Dinah Washington again, Etta James, Ella Fitzgerald, a brilliant reading from Billie Holiday, Duke Ellington, Sinatra, Judy Garland, right up to Ringo Starr, Jeff Lynne, Joni Mitchell, and a smashing pop-punk surf version by Raining Sound, and a terrible version by Bob Dylan. It's Only a Paper Moon. Surely one of pop music's most insistent earworms, Arlen used to call songs like this lemon drops, the easiest and most enjoyable songs to write. It's a classic pop melody, with none of the usual tricky Arlen chord interjections. Written with another of Arlen's best friends, Yipharburg and Billy Rose, the song bounced around a few failed shows on flop movies before it found its place as a pop song, and artists like Nat King Cole, Ella Fitzgerald, Frank Sinatra, Chet Baker, Mel Torme, and in 2012 Paul McCartney all did great to presentable versions. Miles Davis even cut it on his Dig album with Sonny Rollins. Extra bonus trivia: in a movie, A Streetcar Named Desire, Blanche Dubois sings this song to herself as she gets ready in the bathroom and Stanley exposes her Barnum and Bailey world to Stella. Get Happy. This was the first song Arlen wrote with Ted Koehler in 1930 as part of a review, and it knocked around for 20 years until Judy Garland performed it as the centerpiece of her last MGM film, the charming and underrated Summer Stock, and framed it with a spectacular dance routine. Thereafter it joined another Arlen song, no surprise, it was Over the Rainbow, as Garland's signature tune. Despite an atypically linear melody, as usual, a who's who of the great and the good queued up to record it. The Sinatras, Crosbys, Fitzgeralds, Doris Days, Tony Bennett, etc. But a couple of the more unusual versions were Bud Powell's hysterical take on it, where he plays the song backwards, upside down, widdershins and crooked, and Jerry Lewis, who did a pretty good straight version of it. Come Rain or Come Shine, a song I love to sing in the shower. This was written by Johnny Mercer for the musical St. Louis Woman. The song was a moderate hit when it was released in 1946. It then fell into obscurity for a decade before Billie Holiday did what only Billie Holiday can do with a song. Ray Charles did perhaps the best remembered version of the song on his Genius of Ray Charles album in 1959. That Old Black Magic. A song Johnny Mercer wrote with Judy Garland in mind. The story goes that Mercer and Garland were making more than music, if you get my drift, but her version stunk the place out. Written in 1942 for the film Star Spangled Rhythm and nominated for an Academy Award, legend has it the song only took 3 hours to write. Arlen had 9 Academy Award nominations for a single win, Over the Rainbow. This was recorded by many artists. Glenn Miller, Margaret Whiting, Sammy Davis Jr. gave it his old zip zam zoom treatment. Tony Bennett did a great version with Jay Brubeck's group. Louis Prima, the pride of New Orleans, did a crazed version of it, and the less said of Johnny Mathis's disco version, the better. Be that as it may, they were all chasing smoke because Frank Sinatra's 1947 version was superior, and his harder, funkier version on his 1961 Come Swing With Me, which was Sinatra's final swing album, closed the door on it. It is firmly in the orbit of Planet Frank. My Shining Hour, probably the least well known of the songs here. My Shining Hour was written for a film called The Sky's the Limit, which starred Fredastaire. Another failed Oscar nomination, the song didn't gain a wide currency among singers. Ella Fitzgerald, who owns it, and Nancy Wilson with her cool as ice voice are major recordings, while Scott Walker did a version of it on his TV show in 1969 and made a pretty good fist of it. John Coltrane took it at a sprightly pace for his Coltrane Jazz album, and it was one of the few highlights of Sinatra's largely fatuous trilogy album. What makes this song interesting to me is that its intricate melody and demands on the singer, and of the individual approach each singer has to take to it. Between the Devil and the Deep Blue Sea. A sprightly dance tune co-written with Ted Koehler, this song has been enduringly popular from Cab Calloway and Louis Armstrong in the early 30s through Ella, Bing, Carmen McRae, Bobby Darin, Mel Torme, Thelonious Monk and even George Harrison, who packed dance floors with it. But for my money, it was Count Basie with Helen Humes and the legend Lester Young in 1939 who did the bangingest version of this banger. Let's take a walk around the block. Written with Yipharburg and Ivor Gershwin, this was written for the stage show Life Begins at 8:40 and had a jolly good run in 1934 to 1935. The song dwelt in obscurity until Doris Day, of all people, resurrected it on her lovely and enjoyable Cut and Capers album, but the definitive version is Ella Fitzgerald's from 1961. Funny thing is that Ella was a tad offended by some of the risque lyrics, but the purer than the driven snow Doris Day didn't have a problem with them. The virgins can wait, sir, it grows late, sir. But she still manages to whoop it up with a buoyant melody and clever, tricky lyric. One for my baby and one more for the road. From the same film as My Shining Hour, this is the supreme example of what Arlen called a tapeworm, a song with an irregular bar structure. Pop songs usually have 16-bar verse structures, but for Arlen, 11 was no problem, 17 bars the means to an end, 19 bars bring that sucker on. One for my baby, despite being what Fredastaire called the best song ever written especially for him, is Frank Sinatra's song. Not his theme song, not his greatest moment, but the song that defines him in the public imagination. Not the brash singer or bombastic bloviator of My Way, but the greatest saloon singer singing the greatest saloon song ever written. Also, incidentally, Sinatra's 1958 recording of One for My Baby was in TRB number 60, selected as the greatest recording of the 1950s. Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead. The ultimate lemon drop, which was one of the first and, according to Arlen, easiest songs that he and Yipharburg wrote for The Wizard of Oz. Part of a long medley of sorts, which followed a strong woman who'd followed an alternate lifestyle, being killed when a child dropped a house on her, and later reprised when a clearly mentally ill woman reveals a tragic and rare allergy to water. The last time I played this song was when the despicable Julia Gillard was deposed as Prime Minister of Australia. A curiosity in Arlen's catalogue, because it is effectively a march with Arlen's nimble melody over the top. It was also at one point closing music for the legendary Goon Show in the 1950s. There were dozens of great songwriting teams who wrote the entries in what we call the Great American Songbook, each authoring fascinating chapters based on the nature of their work. Irving Berlin's sentimentality, Cole Porter's utter lack of sentimentality, the insouciant eroticism of Hoagie Carmichael, Cy Coleman's adult aspirationalism, Walter Donaldson's cosy domestic fantasies, George Gershwin's staggering range and ambition, Richard Rodgers' staggering prolificness, bettering even Gershwin with pop tunes, show tunes, set pieces for blockbusters by the dozen. Harry Warren was a doyen of the songbook from its earliest days through to the end of World War II, and Jimmy Van Heusen had the snap and the swagger of the post-war American dream. But for me, no one made the American songbook sound more American than Harold Arlen. When Arlen died in 1986, Irving Berlin commented, "He wasn't as well known as some of us, but he was as good as any of us, and he was loved by all of us." I think that's a wonderful way for a musician's career to be summed up. Don't you?
What selection were you planning to warble?
One for my baby.
One for my baby. Harold Arlen. Oh, great song. Sexy, torchy. Yeah? Wrenched from the guts of a woman who's really lived.
Mr. Graham.
Sing.
It's 2:45. There's no one in the place except you and me.
There, the girl. Leave me sell it.
So set them up, Joe. I've got a little story you ought to know.
Tell him, baby.
We're drinking, my friend,
Tell him.
to the end of a brief episode.
Tear my heart out, Mary.
So make it one for my baby.